Fortnite's vault has always interested me. It contains weapons, items, and vehicles throughout the history of the game, spanning from Chapter 1 preseason all the way now to Chapter 6. While there are a few exceptions, the word vault has always acted as a phrase to signify the removal of a weapon without completely taking it out of the game's code. It's more of an archive feature, and over time the vault list has grown exponentially as more weapons come and go in the current seasons. But it's gotten to a point where a large portion of these weapons feel imitative of pre-existing weapons, or just uninspired, and that we as players are given a false sense of having diversity in the loot pool.
Who are you?
I'm Turbo!
I wasn't the biggest fan of Chapter 2 when it came to aspects like the large-ass map in like half the seasons, but where the chapter shined in my opinion was the loot pool. Chapter 2 carried over Chapter 1's base loot pool and expanded on it. For the most part, it felt like we were getting new, fresh ideas for weapons like the combat AR. It has an extremely fast fire rate, but insane recoil. The Dragon's Breath shotgun, while more situational, it still had its uses, I guess. Even the charged shotgun, these were interesting ideas and concepts for guns that mostly landed. Now, we got some dog shit here and there. We sure did. Chapter 3 would be the very first time the base loot pool would be entirely replaced by different weapons. This sounds good on paper until you start to realize that a lot of these weapons are very similar to weapons we've seen before. But it gets even better. These weapons are extremely black and white. The Ranger AR is a bad version of the Heavy AR. The Striker Pump is a bad version of the Pump. The Auto Shotgun is a bad version of the Tac Shotgun. While the Scar doesn't have a scope, the MK7 still acted as the fast-firing AR of the loot pool, and it was broken as shit. The Stinger SMG was the SMG, but it was broken as shit. You see where I'm going with this? I'm totally fine with getting reskinned guns as long as they're a step up from the previous gun. I think the Hammer AR is a great example of this, and a lot of players would consider this to be a step up from the classic AR despite the lower damage.
Holy fuck.
They made a really good AR, but this shit was only in like 2 seasons in Chapter 3 and never came back to Battle Royale. I glazed Chapter 4 and I will continue to do so, but the new weapons in that chapter were honestly really good descendants and could have totally taken the mantle as Fortnite's base loot pool for the foreseeable future. But even then, there were a lot of guns coming in and out. The Thunder Pump was only in 1 season, and it's a shame that we mainly see broken gimmick weapons get unvaulted in the new Battle Royale seasons.
Now get the fuck out of here.
Another thing that just pinches my scrotum is that they will make new weapons just to set them up for failure. Even with Lawless, yeah, the Collateral AR is good up close to medium range, but for long range, it's god awful, and for what? They took out the Fury AR in favor of this? But why would you use this new gun anyway since the Hollow Twister and the Auger here? Now it's at a point where there's just better options, and that's the problem. Ninja actually brought this up, but people think he's worse than Genghis Khan because he points shit like this out. The scenario of having alright guns but being swept by big ass powerful weapons is what I'll be referring to as the hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby method. I really started to notice this method occurred during Chapter 5. In Season 2 they took out the Striker AR and replaced it with the Warforged AR, which was a worse version of the Striker with more recoil.
This is bullshit.
Even if you don't take issue with this, the Thunderburst SMG was still in the game, so why would you use the gun? You don't want your gun to shoot bouncy baby bubble balls, but you also don't want it to sweep the entire loot pool. Even if it passes both tests, it's still at risk of being overshadowed completely by a pre-existing weapon like seen with the Harbinger and the Thunderburst. Now, I don't think it would be fair of me to say that Chapter 6 hasn't been improving when it comes to making original shit. The Pump and Dump achieves a balance of not shitting on the Sentinel, yet being a new original hybrid weapon that we haven't seen before. But it also wouldn't be fair of me to ignore that the Hydrogen Bomb versus Coughing Baby method is still being present in Chapter 6. The Hollow Twister is still in the game, and you have the Mammoth Pistol? That's 2 fucking hydrogen bombs. And these new weapons are all coughing babies, since they aren't worth weapon slots.
Get that away from me!
If Fortnite kept porting over older weapons instead of making new ones that act virtually the same as the old ones, there would be no reason for big content creators to make videos on the game, considering that a lot of big content creators primarily base the quality of seasons based on how much content there is. It's emblematic that Fortnite doesn't have a lot of faith in a season without obligatory new weapons for the sake of being new. People's perception of the Kneecapper has been, it's what the Typhoon Blade should have been. My question is, why couldn't they just keep the Typhoon Blade all chapter and tinker with it over time until it's an iconic, solid, and balanced mobility item? Wait a minute, I hate the Typhoon Blade. Yes, I still hate the sword, but it's the most obvious case of taking advantage of lowering our expectations when we settle for a diet version of it. I'd rather have it be fixed and balanced over a period of time until they get it right. That way devs don't have to be constantly jumping on new projects like items and weapons just for them to be vaulted a season later. However, it's clear why it got vaulted. If you kept the Typhoon Blade in the game, you wouldn't be able to give it the photo op in the new poster of the season. Despite my idea having good aspects, it's a slippery slope when it comes to that mentality. If Chapter 4 had that approach of having one mobility item all chapter, we likely wouldn't have seen things like the kinetic blade or the rocket ram. It also wouldn't be good for player counts either. Players would only see 2 new weapons for a season launch and be like, that's it? Honestly, it's a hole that Fortnite unintentionally dug themselves in. Fortnite set a standard in Chapter 1 by adding new weapons and items bi-weekly and sometimes weekly, which is insane. Chapter 2 Season 1 gave us the reciprocal of that, literally nothing, and we saw how that went. So the only course of action was to try to replicate that feeling of constantly seeing new shit in the game, but eventually you're gonna have overlap in weapon concepts. You can't keep inventing the wheel over and over again. But even with Chapter 1, weapons mostly carried over to each season, which plays a part in why a lot of people, including myself, praise the Chapter 1 weapons. They're not only really good, but we got to use them for 10 seasons, which is the length of 2 modern chapters combined. You cut off any potential that these weapons might have when they only have a chapter or even a season to live. However, despite the quality of loot pools potentially being good, people might call the game stale if Fortnite took this approach today. It's a hard position to be in, and if I had to suggest anything, is to take a risk and give weapons the lifespan they deserve. If the Chapter 6 Season 1 assault rifles were the Fury AR, the Heavy AR, and the Hammer AR, or the shotguns being the Sentinel, the Maven, and the Combat, that shit would have been bonkers. These unvaults have so much potential to have a meaningful presence in the loot pools, and they've been getting better about that. The AUG's back. This is good. The new gun back to back with the old gun. This is what I love to see.
That's what we've been waiting for!
I hope they have a presence like this going forward, since last season relegated unvaults to overpowered roles or roles that get overshadowed by the Chapter 6 guns. If content creators are gonna justify literal fucking garbage since it was a risk on Epic's end,
Honestly, just take more risks. Even though the Season 3 Wrecked wasn't that well received, some cars were OP, I actually like when they try things like that because it keeps the game fresh. Take more risks.
I agree.
then take a risk on something that actually has more merit for improving the loot pools and the game itself. Yeah, people might complain that the loot pool would feel stale because they wouldn't pump out new weapons every 5 seconds, but would you really complain if you were stuck with the Hammer AR or the Havoc shotgun all chapter? As much as I don't like Chapter 3's shotguns and the lever shotgun from Chapter 2, I can somewhat appreciate how they're relatively unique and are mainly held back by their low damage, which could easily be resolved. Remember in Season 9 when the combat shotgun was super clunky and inconsistent with its damage? Fortnite took their time and fixed many of the issues and made it to be one of the strongest shotguns up to that point. Now it's a fan favorite weapon by many people. Despite Wrecked being bad, it was honestly really nice seeing the shotgun again, and I want to see more of it. Current Fortnite balancing would buff some random ass stat like increasing the reload speed or the pullout time instead of what the gun actually suffered from.
First, get a jar. Patrick, that's a
Barely nerfed Gatekeeper shotgun.
Yes.
Chapter 7 will most likely feature an entirely new loot pool. Those weapons will either be slight deviations from classic weapons or just actual reskins. This will happen in Chapter 8, Chapter 9, Chapter 10, and so on and so forth. Which, yeah, they're technically new weapons, but it's gonna be pretty evident to a lot of people that the weapons are gonna be reused. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm being a spoiled little bitch right now saying, I'm not impressed, we need new original weapons every single season. I'm more aligned with, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'm simply suggesting that Fortnite look at the vault, weed out all the shitty weapons, the broken gimmick weapons, the weapons that are too situational, and make a list of good potential unvaults that you can keep rotating, and actually give them a good purpose instead of, yeah, let's bring back the Ranger AR. Because I actually really like these weapons, and I guess Reload's there to be a playground of sorts. Like, I see why they take this approach, but sometimes I'm like, damn. Do you think I'm a dumbass? Let me know in the comments. This is my dog Tadashi. He is a sad ass puppy. He's sad because you aren't using my creator code in the item shop. Do you really want to make my puppy sad? No! Anyways, I'm gonna head out and play some ranked because they brought back Siphon. Stay based and valid, have a wholesome day, and fly away today.